I sit cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by tenant maintenance requests. Mrs. Peterson needs her leaky faucet fixed before the weekend. The Johnsons on the third floor reported their heater making strange noises. Mr. Garcia wants permission to install a ceiling fan. This is my Friday night sorting through the small problems of others while sipping lukewarm coffee. The doorbell rings. I glance at my watch, 7:15 p.m. Nobody visits without calling first, especially not on a Friday. When I open the door, my sister Valerie stands there with a smile that doesn't touch her eyes. Her camel-colored coat probably costs more than 3 months of my rent. "Miranda," she says, voice bright and brittle like breaking glass. "May I come in?" Before I can answer, she brushes past me into my apartment, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors. She surveys my living room, the stack of maintenance requests, the half-empty coffee mug, the couch with the throw blanket. "Grandma Eleanor crocheted for me years ago. Working on a Friday night? You always were the dedicated one," she says, but the words sound more like an accusation than a compliment. She pulls an envelope from her leather portfolio. "I came to deliver this personally, as a courtesy." The paper feels unusually heavy in my hands. I open it and scan the contents, my eyes catching on numbers that can't possibly be right. "This is a rent increase notice," I say, "from $2,350 to $7,100? You can't be serious. I've lived here 5 years. Fair market value, little sister. Business is business." Valerie adjusts her watch, a gleaming gold Cartier that catches the light. "The family voted last weekend. We're repositioning all the properties for maximum return." My mind rewinds. "Last weekend? At Mom and Dad's?" "You should come to more family gatherings," she says with a shrug. "Important decisions get made." The memory surfaces like a drowning victim, 14 relatives seated around my parents' dining room table. Everyone's eyes had slid away from mine when I mentioned Riverside Apartments. Mom had changed the subject while Dad refilled wine glasses. My cousins had exchanged knowing glances. They had already decided. They had already known. My pulse quickens, mouth suddenly desert dry. My hands tremble slightly as I refold the notice. When they let her crush me in silence, they never imagined that silence would become my weapon. I think, the words forming somewhere deep in my mind where fear hasn't reached yet. "You can't be serious," I repeat, voice steadier than I feel. "I've managed this building since Grandma Eleanor died. I've kept the tenants happy, handled repairs, and collected rent. For which the family has compensated you," Valerie counters. "But sentiment doesn't pay dividends." An old memory surfaces Christmas morning when I was 12. Valerie unwrapped a pearl necklace while I received a clearance rack sweater from the discount store. My parents beaming at her, barely glancing at me. "Your sister knows what she wants in life," they'd explained later. "She's looking out for the family's interests." Grandma Eleanor had pulled me aside that same day. "Your sister seeks power," she whispered, patting my hand. "You seek connection. Remember which one builds a legacy." I study Valerie now, her expensive watch, her manicured nails, the subtle logo on her portfolio that matches the one on her law firm's letterhead. The timing suddenly clicks in my analytical brain. 3 weeks after her firm lost the Westridge case. 2 months after she purchased that new house in Oakwood Hills. Part of me wants to beg, to remind her of our shared childhood. Another part knows it would be pointless. "I'll need to review this with my attorney before responding," I say, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Valerie laughs, the sound sharp enough to cut. "What attorney would waste time on this? The building's legally mine. The transfer papers were signed last month." My stomach plummets. This isn't just about my apartment, it's about my home, my dignity, my last connection to Grandma Eleanor. It's about Mrs. Simmons in 2B who lives on Social Security and bakes cookies for everyone at Christmas. It's about Mr. Peterson, who's been here 40 years and knows every creaking floorboard by name. "Mom and Dad know about this?" I ask, though I already know the answer. "Of course," Valerie says, checking her watch. "Your sister manages all the family assets." She mimics our father's authoritative tone. She knows what she's doing. The smile that spreads across her face isn't about money. It's about winning. About finally removing me completely from Grandma Eleanor's legacy. My phone buzzes. A text message from Mrs. Simmons. "Come down for tea, dear. You look upset." I saw Valerie arrive. The old woman has lived in the building for 40 years. She was Grandma Eleanor's best friend long before she became mine. She sees everything from her window overlooking the front entrance. Valerie notices the message. The tenants aren't your concern anymore, she says, gathering her portfolio. I'll handle communications going forward. Mrs. Simmons has lived here since before we were born, I say. Grandfather clauses are for sentimental fools, Valerie replies. The market doesn't care about Christmas cookies and rent that's decades below value. Grandfather. Mrs. Simmons appears in my doorway, her silver hair neatly pinned back, wearing her usual cardigan and sensible shoes. She carries her favorite teapot on a small tray. I thought we could use some chamomile, she says, not waiting for an invitation to enter. At 72, she's earned the right to ignore certain social norms. Valerie's dismissive glance bounces off the older woman like rain off a windshield. Mrs. Simmons, Valerie says with practiced politeness. We were just discussing some business matters. I heard, Mrs. Simmons says, setting down her tea tray. She straightens her spine to her full 5'2" height. I knew your grandmother for 50 years, Valerie. What would Eleanor say about this? For a moment, Valerie's perfect mask slips. Then she recovers, smooths her coat, and heads for the door. 30 days notice, Miranda. It's all perfectly legal. When the door closes behind her, Mrs. Simmons pours tea into 2 cups with steady hands. Some battles need preparation, not immediate confrontation, she says, handing me a steaming cup. Eleanor faced vultures like this her whole life. She taught me how to handle them. Sanjer. The chamomile's gentle aroma grounds me, slowing my racing heart. A thought forms, crystallizing from the fog of shock and anger. I need to check Grandma's old papers, I say. Mrs. Simmons smiles. I was hoping you'd say that. I stare at the cardboard box on my living room floor, throat tight with a mix of grief and anticipation. 2 days after Valerie's bombshell, I finally gathered the courage to retrieve Grandma Eleanor's financial records from my storage unit. Dust motes dance in the sunbeam cutting across the room as I lift the first folder. The pages inside tell a story I never imagined. Bank statements, property deeds, email printouts. Each document reveals another piece of Valerie's systematic dismantling of Eleanor's legacy. An email from Valerie to a luxury development firm catches my eye. Once we secure full control of Riverside, we can begin converting to high-end condos. Initial estimates suggest 300% return on investment within 18 months. My hands shake. The date on the email? 2 weeks after Eleanor's funeral. Another folder contains minutes from a family trust meeting 6 years ago. Valerie had convinced our parents to sell the lake house, the one Eleanor had specifically mentioned wanting me to have someday. Market conditions favor immediate liquidation, Valerie had argued. My parents had agreed without hesitation. For the family's financial security, Dad had said when I questioned the decision. The same justification echoes through document after document. The small inheritance my cousin Thomas received instead of the antique shop Eleanor promised him. The vacation property in Maine that disappeared into family investments, Valerie controlled. The retirement fund contributions for longtime family employees that were restructured into company expansion under Valerie's supervision. Mrs. Simmons knocked softly before entering with a tray of sandwiches and tea. Her eyes widened at the papers surrounding me. I found rental increase notices for all the senior tenants, I say, voice hollow. She's targeting everyone, not just me. Mr. Peterson's would jump to $5,800. Mrs. Daniels to $6,450. You. Don't worry about me, Mrs. Simmons says, setting down the tray. What else have you found? I hold up a handwritten note in Eleanor's distinctive script. Riverside must remain in the family. The legacy must be protected. The paper feels warm in my hands, like a message from beyond. She knew, I whisper. She knew what Valerie would try to do. While Mrs. Simmons pours tea, I continue sorting through the folders. A pattern emerges, Valerie positioning herself since before Eleanor's illness. Small transfers. Legal document revisions. Quiet consolidation of authority while everyone looked the other way. Your grandmother was no fool, Mrs. Simmons says, handing me a steaming cup. She watched Valerie for years. The realization hits me like a physical blow. Eleanor wasn't just being kind when she asked me to help with her financial records during her final months. She was preparing me, training me. The weekends spent reviewing property maintenance costs, the afternoons learning about tax assessments. She was arming me for this moment. I slumped back against the couch, worldview tilting on its axis. My parents never saw me as Valerie's equal, did they? Mrs. Simmons' silence is answer enough. Every family gathering now plays differently in my memory. The Christmas dinners where my law school application was dismissed, while Valerie's firm partnership made the toast. The summer barbecues where my property management certification warranted a nod while Valerie's smallest court victory earned champagne. The Thanksgiving when I announced my promotion to building manager and mom quickly changed the subject to Valerie's new Mercedes. I've been so blind, I whisper. Not blind, Mrs. Simmons corrects. Just trusting. There's a difference. I sit up straighter, methodically sorting the papers into new piles. No longer chronological but strategic. Evidence of financial misconduct. Documentation of tenant mistreatment. Records of property ownership and transfer. She always waits until people are vulnerable. I say, recognizing the pattern in Valerie's timing. She struck after Eleanor's death, after Thomas's divorce, after the Petersons' medical bills. Mrs. Simmons nods. Predators target the wounded. But being a lawyer doesn't make her invincible, I continue, thoughts crystallizing. It just means I need to be more prepared. The phone rings, and Valerie's name flashes on the screen. I answer the speaker. You have a week to decide, she says without preamble. I'm being generous in giving you notice at all. The market won't wait. I'll need more time to review everything, I reply, voice steadier than I feel. There's nothing to review, she snaps. The decision is made. Mom and Dad agree. Almost on cue, my phone buzzes with a text from my mother. Your sister has carried this family financially for years. We owe her. After ending the call, I noticed a legal brief in one of the folders, a high-profile case Valerie's firm lost last month. Another folder contains bank notices showing mortgage extension requests on Valerie's new house in Oakwood Hills. Credit card statements revealing mounting balances. Partnership meeting minutes, noting pressure to bring in more revenue. This isn't just greed, I realize aloud. She's desperate. Mrs. Simmons peers at the documents, which makes her dangerous. A final text from my father confirms my suspicions. Family gathering next Sunday to finalize arrangements. Be there. A week, I murmur. She's giving me a week before the guillotine falls. Mrs. Simmons stands suddenly. You need Lawrence Carver. Who? Eleanor's attorney. Not the family firm, her personal lawyer, Mrs. Simmons reaches for her phone. He retired last year, but he still consults. Eleanor always said he was the only attorney she trusted completely. While Mrs. Simmons makes the call, I continue organizing the documents. The financial records show years of transactions. Statements from long-term tenants about promises Eleanor made regarding their housing security. Maintenance records I've kept meticulously since taking over management. By the time Mrs. Simmons returns, I've filled 3 separate boxes with organized evidence. Lawrence will see us tomorrow morning, she announces. He says he's been expecting our call. Expecting it? I echo. Mrs. Simmons points to a sealed envelope I haven't opened yet. The handwriting on the front reads, For Miranda, when the time comes. With trembling fingers, I break the seal and unfold a single sheet of paper in Eleanor's handwriting. When the time comes, Lawrence has everything you need. Remember what I told you. Your sister seeks power. You seek connection, and connection will always outlast power. For the first time in 3 days, I feel something beyond shock and anger. A quiet certainty settles in my chest. This isn't about feelings anymore, I say, closing the file folder. It's about facts. Mrs. Simmons smiles, a fierce gleam in her eyes. Eleanor would be proud. Tomorrow, we meet Lawrence Carver. Tomorrow, we will begin to fight back. On Monday afternoon, I sit in Lawrence Carver's wood-paneled office, staring at documents spread across his mahogany desk. Afternoon light slants through Venetian blinds, casting prison bar shadows across papers that just transformed my entire understanding of the last 3 years. Say it again, I whisper, my fingers tracing the embossed seal on what appears to be a deed. Carver adjusts his wire-rimmed glasses, his weathered face kind but serious. Your grandmother left you $920,000 in a private trust 3 years ago. With that money, you formed Stonebridge Holdings LLC with my assistance, of course. Stonebridge then purchased Riverside Apartments from the family trust. I pick up the mortgage papers, my signature staring back at me. The memory surfaces hazily, Grandma Eleanor asking me to sign some contingency paperwork while she was still lucid. I'd trusted her completely, never questioning why. But Valerie has been collecting rent, handling everything for years. She acts like she owns the building. Carver's eyes twinkle with something between amusement and vindication. Miss Wells Harrison never bothered to verify the ownership transfer after your grandmother's passing. She simply assumed control. The realization washes over me in waves. So all this time, I've been the actual owner? Precisely. Your grandmother made you manager of Stonebridge Holdings. You've legally owned Riverside Apartments for 3 years while your sister has merely been an unauthorized property manager. A laugh bubbles up from somewhere deep inside me, surprising us both. Grandma Eleanor planned this all along. She was quite strategic, Carver says, sliding a sealed envelope toward me. Eleanor left this for when the time came. 2. The envelope contains a single sheet of paper with Grandma's elegant handwriting. Don't chase her approval. Build your own ground. My heart pounds against my ribs as understanding crystallizes. This isn't just ammunition, it's a foundation. Valerie scheduled a family meeting for Sunday evening. I say, gathering the documents. She's planning to evict tenants for being late on rent. Carver checks his watch. Then I believe we have a meeting to attend. The week passed in preparing for the confrontation, and with the right support, I will protect my grandma's but now my legacy. On Sunday, the dining room of my parents' Tudor-style home feels suffocating. 14 relatives sit around the glossy table that has witnessed decades of family announcements, celebrations, and betrayals. Crystal glasses catch light from the chandelier, while Mother's prized silver serving dishes gleam on the sideboard. Valerie stands at the head of the table, legal documents arranged before her like weapons. Her camel blazer matches her professional demeanor as she addresses the attentive family. Mother and father sit to her right, nodding in agreement at everything their golden child says. As I was explaining, Valerie continues, Tenant 3B Mrs. Peterson is 3 days late on rent again. I've prepared an eviction notice. She holds up the document like a trophy. Business is business. Mrs. Simmons sits beside me, a guest I insisted on bringing. Her presence makes my parents uncomfortable. They know she sees through their polished veneer to the rot beneath. I've reviewed Riverside's financial records, Valerie adds. We're bleeding money on maintenance for these outdated units. Once we clear out the problematic tenants, we can begin upgrading to attract a more reliable clientele. My mother nods sympathetically. It must be difficult making these hard decisions, darling. For years I would have shrunk in my chair, swallowing objections like bitter pills. But something has shifted inside me, knowledge replacing uncertainty, strength displacing fear. Actually, I say, my voice clearer than I expected. I've reviewed the records with my attorney. The room falls silent. Valerie's smile freezes on her face. What attorney? The doorbell chimes, perfect timing, orchestrated by Mrs. Simmons' text message sent under the table. My father frowns, excusing himself to answer. When he returns, Lawrence Carver follows behind, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. Recognition flashes in my mother's eyes. She knows exactly who Island. This is Lawrence Carver, I announced, legal counsel for Stonebridge Holdings LLC. Valerie's smile vanishes completely. What's going on, Miranda? Carver places his portfolio on the table, extracting documents with methodical precision. I represent Miss Wells in her capacity as owner and manager of Stonebridge Holdings, which purchased Riverside Apartments 3 years ago from the family trust. The room erupts in confused murmurs. My father's face reddens while my mother's pale to the color of her bone china. That's impossible. Valerie stammers, her manicured hands gripping the table edge. I would know if the building had been sold. Carver slides the deed across the polished wood. Everything was executed legally. Your grandmother ensured all appropriate filings were made with the county recorder's office. This can't be legal, Valerie insists, voice rising. Mother would never. Grandma Eleanor made sure I could protect what matters, I interrupted, meeting Valerie's gaze directly. The building, the tenants, her legacy. My cousin Rachel studies the documents, her accounting background allowing her to grasp the situation quickly. These look legitimate. Miranda owns Riverside through an LLC. Which means, Carver adds calmly, that any eviction notices or rent increases would require Miss Wells' authorization as the legal owner. Valerie sinks into her chair, perfectly tailored jacket suddenly seeming too large for her frame. Her control over me, over the building, over the narrative, visibly crumbles. My father clears his throat. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Carver replies. Just careful planning by Eleanor Wells to ensure her wishes were respected. The family gathering dissolves into chaos. My aunts whispering urgently, uncles checking phones as if answers might appear there, cousins reassessing family alliances in real time. Through it all, Valerie sits motionless, her legal training already calculating counterattacks. As we drive away later, Mrs. Simmons squeezes my hand, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Eleanor would be so proud. She always said you had steel in your spine, you just needed to discover it yourself. Back at Riverside, tenants gather in the lobby when word spreads. Mr. Garcia from 4 Amperes brings his homemade sangria. The Johnsons arrive with a casserole still warm from their oven. Even the quiet Mr. Watson from the corner apartment joins us. Is it true? Mrs. Peterson asks, her arthritis-gnarled hands clutching mine. You own the building now? I've owned it for 3 years, I explain, still getting used to the words myself. I just didn't know. Their relief is palpable. Years of uncertainty lifting from stooped shoulders and worried faces. Valerie told me last month they were converting to luxury condos. Mrs. Johnson confides. Said we should start looking for other arrangements. Mr. Garcia nods. She denied my maintenance requests 3 times and said the building wasn't worth investing in. One by one, they share stories of Valerie's calculated neglect, her subtle intimidation, her dismissive attitude toward their concerns. Each revelation strengthens my resolve. Carver observes quietly from the sidelines, sipping Mr. Garcia's sangria. When the gathering begins to disperse, he approaches me. This is just the beginning, he says. Eleanor left you more than you know. I watch my neighbors return to their apartments, not just tenants, but a community Grandma Eleanor spent decades building. For the first time, I understand what she meant about connection being more valuable than power. But as satisfaction settles over me, a nagging thought emerges. Valerie won't surrender without a fight. She's calculating her next move even now, probably on the phone with her law firm colleagues. Do I push for everything now, riding this wave of victory? Or do I prepare for the inevitable counterattack? Mrs. Simmons seems to read my thoughts. Don't rush, she advises. Eleanor taught me that the best victories come from patience. Tonight was just the opening move. I nod, understanding completely. What happened tonight wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. I sit at Carver's antique mahogany desk, surrounded by stacks of meticulously organized documents. 3 days have passed since I revealed my ownership of Riverside Apartments, watching shock transform Valerie's usually composed features. The memory brings a flicker of satisfaction, but I push it away. That momentary victory means nothing if I can't secure permanent protection for my tenants. We need to analyze every potential legal challenge Valerie might mount, Carver says, sliding another folder toward me. Your sister isn't just an attorney, she's a strategic thinker who won't accept defeat easily. My fingers trace the embossed LLC stamp on Stonebridge Holdings Incorporation papers. I keep expecting to feel more. Triumphant? I admit. But all I can think about is what comes next. Carver's gray eyebrows lift slightly. That's exactly the right instinct, Miranda. Complacency is how people lose what they've rightfully gained. I spend hours examining property management regulations and LLC statutes, taking careful notes in Grandma Eleanor's leather-bound journal. The familiar scent of its pages grounds me as I map out Valerie's potential countermoves. Each time my mind wanders toward celebration, I redirect it toward preparation. Look at this, I say, pushing a financial statement across the desk. Valerie has been collecting rent under Riverside Management for the past 3 years, even though the property legally belongs to Stonebridge Holdings. Carver adjusts his reading glasses. That's not just misleading, it's potentially fraudulent. I open my laptop and create a spreadsheet to track every maintenance request that went unfulfilled during Valerie's management. Each ignored leak, each postponed repair, becomes a data point in a pattern of neglect that undermined the building's value, while maximizing short-term profit. I'm not doing this for revenge, I tell Carver, though part of me wonders if that's entirely true. I'm doing it because I need to understand exactly what she's done to protect myself from what she might do next. Treat this like a business strategy, not family drama, Carver advises. Your grandmother knew the difference, and it served her well. The next morning, Mrs. Simmons arrives at my apartment with a thick manila folder. Her silver hair catches the light as she hands it to me with a steady grip that belies her 72 years. 15 signed statements from tenants, she announces, documenting maintenance requests that were never addressed, rent increases without proper notice, and Valerie's dismissive treatment when they called with concerns. I add these to our growing evidence collection. Did anyone refuse to provide a statement? Only the Davidsons in 3C, she says. They're afraid of retaliation. We'll protect them either way, I promise. That afternoon, I walked through the building with my phone, photographing water damage in the laundry room ceiling, cracked tiles in the lobby, and the rusty pipes in the basement that should have been replaced years ago. Each image documents Valerie's neglect while she collected maintenance fees that never went toward actual maintenance. Back in my apartment, I pore over financial records that reveal a pattern more disturbing than simple neglect. Maintenance funds from Riverside Apartments had been systematically diverted to an account labeled Management Overhead. The transactions, meticulously documented in Eleanor's records, show nearly $83,000 that should have gone toward building improvements, but instead disappeared into Valerie's personal expenses. The doorbell interrupts my analysis. When I open it, my parents stand in the hallway, their expressions a familiar blend of disappointment and concern that instantly transports me back to childhood. "You're tearing this family apart," my mother says, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her pearl earrings catch the light as she surveys my document-covered dining table with disapproval. "Valerie has always protected us all." My father nods, hands in his pockets. "Your sister says you're threatening legal action now. Is that true?" The realization hits me like cold water. Valerie has been working on them, spinning a narrative where I'm the villain threatening family harmony, rather than the victim protecting what's mine. Did she mention that she diverted over $80,000 of maintenance funds for her personal use? I ask quietly. My mother's gaze slides away. "Business is complicated, Miranda. Valerie understands these things better than I do?" I finished for her. "That's what you've always believed, isn't it? No matter what evidence is right in front of you." Something tightens in my chest, the understanding that my parents may never see the truth, may never acknowledge that their golden child has systematically exploited everyone around her, including them. After they leave with promises to talk sense into me, I return to my spreadsheets with renewed determination. Losing my family's approval hurts, but not nearly as much as surrendering to Valerie's manipulation would. Truth matters more than approval. I whisper to myself, Eleanor's words from years ago finally making perfect sense. I organize another file of evidence, preparing for the battle I now understand is inevitable. The following morning, I sat at Carver's desk, methodically arranging folders into 3 precise stacks. The left contains financial records, showing Valerie's suspicious transfers. The center holds tenant statements documenting neglected maintenance requests. The right displays ownership documents proving my control of Riverside Apartments through Stonebridge Holdings LLC. "How are we looking?" Carver asks, entering with 2 steaming mugs. The aroma of dark roast coffee fills the wood-paneled office. "Everything's in place," I say, accepting the mug with a nod. Tenant notices prepared, financial records secured, building improvement plans drafted. My voice sounds steadier than it did a week ago, when Valerie first appeared at my door with that envelope. Carver settles into his leather chair, the material creaking beneath his weight. "Your grandmother would approve. This isn't just about keeping an apartment building, Miranda. It's about honoring a legacy." I run my finger along the edge of Eleanor's handwritten notes. Her elegant script details every precaution she took to protect what mattered to her. Valerie thinks this is about money. It never was. "That's her fundamental mistake," Carver says, tapping a pen against his legal pad. "She can't fight what she doesn't understand." The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the office as we work. Mrs. Simmons calls twice to report her progress organizing the tenant meeting. Mr. Peterson offers to testify about how I personally fixed his bathroom plumbing when Valerie refused to send a contractor. Even the Johnsons from the 3rd floor provide written statements about mysterious management fees that appeared on their rent statements after Valerie took over. "We're preparing for war, not just another skirmish," I tell Carver as we catalog each piece of evidence. The methodical work calms me. Each document represents another brick in the foundation of our defense. My phone buzzes. Mrs. Simmons. Her name on the screen makes me smile until I read her message. Someone from your sister's law firm just served me papers, claiming I'm violating building policy by organizing tenant meetings. The coffee turns bitter in my mouth. Valerie's targeting Mrs. Simmons now. Carver reads the message over my shoulder, his eyebrows drawing together. A classic intimidation tactic. Target the support system to isolate the primary opponent. My hands clench into fists. I should confront Valerie now. This crosses a line. That's exactly what she wants, Carver warns. Every premature confrontation gives her information about your strategy. Patience. I pace the length of his office, my boots thumping against the hardwood. Mrs. Simmons is 72 years old. She shouldn't have to deal with legal harassment. The phone rings again. Mrs. Simmons called this time. I answer immediately. Don't worry about those papers, dear, she says before I can speak. Her voice carries the calm wisdom of someone who has weathered many storms. Eleanor faced worse from developers trying to buy her out in the 80s. But you shouldn't have to. She wants you to react emotionally, Mrs. Simmons interrupts. Don't give her that satisfaction. I've lived through worse than a strongly worded letter from a law firm. I close my eyes, drawing a deep breath. What do you need from me? Nothing yet. Just stick to the plan. Eleanor knew this day would come. She prepared you for it. Final. After hanging up, I turned to find Carver watching me with something like approval in his eyes. Your sister's making a critical mistake, he says. She thinks this is about property. You understand it's about people. We spent the rest of the afternoon adapting our strategy. If Valerie is willing to target Mrs. Simmons, she might go after other vulnerable tenants. We draft protective measures for everyone in the building, particularly the elderly and those on fixed incomes. When the streetlights flicker outside Carver's window, we finally stop. My back aches from hours hunched over documents. My eyes burn from reading fine print. But for the first time since this began, I feel truly prepared. We have everything we need, Carver says, closing the last folder. It's time to take control. I gather my coat, suddenly aware of how much has changed in just a few days. The woman who trembled when Valerie handed her that envelope seems like a stranger now. This isn't just about me anymore, I say, more to myself than to Carver. It never was. Mrs. Simmons is waiting on her porch when I arrive home. Her silver hair glows under the porch light. Her hands cradle her favorite teapot. Eleanor knew this day would come, she says as I climb the steps. You're ready. The calm certainty in her voice washes over me. The weight of Grandma Eleanor's preparation, Carver's strategic guidance, and Mrs. Simmons' unwavering support steadies me like bedrock beneath my feet. On Monday, Valerie will discover what happens when silence becomes strength. I tap my pen against the stack of tenant applications, but the steady rhythm fails to calm my nerves. The morning sun streams through my apartment windows, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. 3 days of relative peace since our confrontation at my parents' home. 3 days of believing I had finally taken control. My phone vibrates against the coffee table. Carver's name flashes across the screen. My stomach tightens as I answer. Miranda? Valerie just filed an emergency motion with the county court. His voice carries a tension I haven't heard before. She's challenging the LLC formation, claiming Eleanor was mentally compromised when she transferred ownership. My coffee turns bitter on my tongue. That's absurd. Grandma was sharp until the very end. It's a sophisticated strategy, Carver says. She's questioning Eleanor's mental capacity during the exact period when the paperwork was filed. If the judge grants even temporary relief, you could lose control of everything while this drags through the courts. I press my forehead against the cool window glass. How bad is this? The Register printed an interview with her this morning. She's portraying herself as the victim, claiming she's only trying to protect the family assets from Eleanor's misguided decision. I close my eyes. Let me guess. Mom and Dad are backing her up? Front page photo of all 3 of them looking appropriately concerned. Your father was quoted saying they just want what's best for both our daughters. Carver's disgust is barely contained. Valerie's scheduled a press conference for tomorrow afternoon to explain the situation to the community. The familiar pattern of my heart beating too fast begins. Breathe in, breathe out. What happens next? Judge Harmon set an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Everything we've built could be undone with a single ruling. I grab my laptop, hands shaking slightly as I open my email. The court notice sits at the top of my inbox, the legal language cold and formal. Valerie called me last night. I told Carver. Said she's protected this family for years while I did nothing. Said it was time I stopped playing games. This isn't a game, Carver says. It's a desperate move from someone who's realized she's vulnerable. A knock at my door interrupts us. I peer through the peephole to find my parents standing in the hallway. My father's face bears the stern expression I've known since childhood. I need to go, I tell Carver. My parents are here. Remember, he says quickly before I hang up. Everything we prepared for is happening now. Stay focused. Now they're not rebought. I take a deep breath and open the door. Miranda, my father says, not waiting for an invitation before stepping inside. My mother follows, her eyes scanning my living room with the familiar mix of judgment and disappointment. This has gone far enough. What has? I ask, keeping my voice steady. This childish rebellion. My mother says. Valerie has managed the family properties for years. She knows what she's doing. Just let your sister handle it. She always has. The words sting with their familiar dismissal. I notice my father glancing at the folder on my coffee table labeled Riverside Financial Records, 2020 to 2024. Several neighbors stopped me at the grocery store yesterday, my mother adds. They're questioning if you're being fair to your sister. Think about how this looks. The implicit threat hangs in the air. Community pressure, public shaming, the weight of appearances. The same tools they've used my entire life. I have an emergency hearing tomorrow morning, I say, not engaging with their manipulation. I need to prepare. My father places his hand on my shoulder. His cologne smells of cedar and disappointment. Miranda, be reasonable. Your sister has connections, resources. This will only end badly for you. When they finally leave, promising to pray I come to my senses, I collapse onto my couch. My phone buzzes again, a message from Mrs. Simmons. Come down for tea when you're ready. I heard everything. 20 minutes later, I'm seated at Mrs. Simmons' kitchen table, surrounded by photographs of her grandchildren and the faint scent of cinnamon. She pours tea from her mother's floral pot while I outline Valerie's legal strategy. Eleanor anticipated this, Mrs. Simmons says, pushing a plate of shortbread cookies toward me. That's why she had you keep such detailed records of every repair, every conversation. Carver says we have everything we need, I say, but Valerie's entire career is built on winning cases like this. Mrs. Simmons squeezes my hand. I've already called 12 tenants who've lived here more than 5 years. They'll all be at the courthouse tomorrow morning. Character witnesses for Eleanor's mental state. My phone lights up with a text from Carver. Counter motion filed. Judge Harmon requested all financial records for the past 48 months. Remember what Eleanor always said, patience wins more than power. I've spent my whole life being patient, I say, setting down my teacup. It hasn't exactly worked out well for me. Mrs. Simmons studies me over her glasses. There's a difference between waiting passively and preparing strategically. Eleanor taught you the difference. That's why she chose you, not Valerie. By evening, my living room has transformed into a command central. Carver arrived with boxes of financial records and court precedents. 3 other tenants have stopped by with written statements about their interactions with Eleanor in her final years. Valerie will argue undue influence. Carver explains organizing papers into precise stacks. She'll claim Eleanor was susceptible to manipulation due to age and isolation. She'll portray you as opportunistic. That's exactly what she is, Mrs. Simmons mutters. The judge needs to see the pattern. I say, spreading out maintenance requests spanning 5 years. Show how Valerie systematically neglected repairs while pocketing the funds. Show how Eleanor documented everything. My phone rings again. My parents. I silence it without answering. Tomorrow will determine everything, Carver says, checking his watch. We should review your testimony again. Near midnight, long after Carver has gone home to prepare his arguments, Mrs. Simmons insists on staying. She sits on my couch, needlework in her hands, the gentle click of her knitting needles, a soothing counterpoint to my anxiety. You need sleep, she says gently. Tomorrow we will show them what real family means. I nod, but instead of heading to my bedroom, I pull out an old photo album from my bookshelf. The leather cover is worn smooth from years of handling. I find the picture I'm looking for. Eleanor and me on the building rooftop, watching a sunset. I was 12, gangly and serious. She had her arm around my shoulders. I knew even then, Mrs. Simmons says, looking over my shoulder. Eleanor built this case for 3 years before she passed. Every document, every witness statement, every financial record. She knew exactly what Valerie would do. I'm not just fighting for myself anymore, I whisper, tracing Eleanor's face in the photograph. It's for Mrs. Peterson, who can't afford to move. For Mr. Garcia and his grandson. For everyone Valerie would discard for profit. Mrs. Simmons sets aside her knitting. Eleanor always said you understood what mattered most about Riverside, that it's not just property, it's people's homes. I place the photograph on top of my court documents. I hope I make you proud tomorrow, Grandma. Outside my window, the city lights twinkle against the darkness. Tomorrow morning, Judge Harmon will hear both sides. Tomorrow, everything changes, one way or another. I take a deep breath and begin reviewing my testimony one last time. The following morning, I grip the edge of the wooden table, knuckles turning white as Judge Harriman adjusts her glasses. The courtroom buzzes with anticipation. Every seat filled, a sea of faces from Riverside Apartments, Mrs. Peterson with her cane, the Johnsons holding hands in the third row, Mr. Garcia with his weathered face set in determination. Valerie sits across the aisle, spine rigid in her charcoal suit. Her attorney shuffles papers with practiced efficiency. My parents occupy the row directly behind her, my father's arm draped protectively around my mother's shoulders. They haven't looked at me once. Mrs. Simmons reaches over and pats my hand. Breathe, dear. Lawrence Carver arranges his notes methodically beside me. Remember what we discussed. Let the evidence speak. The bailiff calls the court to order, and Judge Harriman begins. This is an emergency hearing regarding ownership and management rights of Riverside Apartments. I understand there are time-sensitive matters at stake. Valerie's attorney stands, James Preston, from her firm's litigation department. His voice fills the courtroom, measured and authoritative. Your Honor, we contend that Stonebridge Holdings LLC was formed under questionable circumstances. Mrs. Eleanor Wells was 82 and suffering from declining health when these documents were executed. We have medical records indicating she was taking prescription medications that could impair judgment. He presents documents to the court with flourish. Furthermore, Miranda Wells has limited business experience and no legal training. Her grandmother was clearly subject to undue influence during a vulnerable period. My stomach knots. They're attacking Grandma Eleanor's mental capacity, something so precious to her. I breathe slowly, remembering her voice. Patience outlasts power. Preston continues. The Wells family has managed these properties for decades. Valerie Wells Harrison has the professional expertise to maximize returns for all concerned parties. My father nods emphatically behind Valerie. My mother dabs at her eyes with a tissue. Financial records indicate, Mrs. Wells Harrison has increased property values by 23% through professional management. This last-minute claim by Miranda Wells threatens the financial security of the entire family. Judge Harriman turns to Carver. Your response, counselor? Carver rises slowly, deliberately. His movements are measured, but his voice remains commanding. Your Honor, I served as Eleanor Wells's attorney for 34 years. I was present when Stonebridge Holdings was formed, and when Eleanor Wells transferred ownership of Riverside Apartments to that LLC. He lifts a video tablet. Rather than tell you about Eleanor's mental capacity, I'd like her to speak for herself. The courtroom stills as Carver connects the tablet to the display screen. Eleanor appears, seated in her living room, date stamp showing 3 weeks before she passed away. I, Eleanor Marie Wells, being of sound mind and body, make this statement freely and without coercion. Her voice, though softer than in her prime, carries the same clarity and purpose I always remembered. I wish to explain my decision regarding Riverside Apartments. She adjusts her glasses, the same gesture Judge Harriman made minutes earlier. I built this property 52 years ago with my husband Charles. For decades, it has provided homes for working families and seniors on fixed incomes. My granddaughter Miranda has demonstrated the commitment to continue this legacy. A tear escapes despite my determination to remain composed. Mrs. Simmons squeezes my hand. Eleanor continues, I am transferring ownership to Stonebridge Holdings LLC, which Miranda will manage. I do this with full awareness of my actions and their consequences. The video continues with Eleanor answering questions from Carver about her decision, her answers lucid and detailed. When it ends, the courtroom remains silent. Carver produces a thick binder. We have documentation of Eleanor Wells' medical evaluations showing her cognitive functions remained excellent until her passing. Her physician, Dr. Martha Coleman, is present to testify if needed. He turns to another exhibit. We also have comprehensive records of building management under Valerie Wells Harrison for the past 3 years. Financial statements show $83,000 earmarked for building maintenance that was diverted to other accounts. A murmur ripples through the courtroom. Valerie shifts in her seat. These documents, Carver continues, sliding another folder toward the judge, show critical repairs repeatedly postponed despite tenant complaints. Mrs. Ruth Simmons has collected statements from 17 tenants regarding deteriorating conditions under Mrs. Wells Harrison's management. Mrs. Simmons rises, clutching a folder of her own. At 72, she stands with surprising strength. Your Honor, I've lived at Riverside for 40 years. I knew Eleanor Wells as both landlord and friend. She trusted Miranda to preserve affordable housing for families and seniors. Under Valerie's management, our heat failed twice last winter. 3 elderly tenants developed respiratory infections. Valerie whispers urgently to Preston, who looks increasingly uncomfortable. Judge Harriman reviews the documents, her expression unreadable. I'd like to hear from Miss Wells directly. My pulse quickens as I stand. The walk to the witness stand feels endless. After I'm sworn in, the judge asks, why do you believe you should maintain control of Riverside Apartments? I look at Valerie, then at my parents, before turning back to the judge. I'm not trying to punish anyone, Your Honor. I'm trying to protect what my grandmother built. Riverside isn't just an asset to be maximized, it's a community where people have lived for decades. Miss Wells Harrison claims you lack the business acumen to manage such a property effectively, the judge notes. I've been managing it for 5 years, Your Honor. First assisting my grandmother, then running daily operations while Valerie handled financial matters. The tenants know me. I know which radiator knocks in winter and which doors stick in summer humidity. The questioning continues for nearly an hour. Preston cross-examines me about financial matters, trying to expose gaps in my knowledge. But Grandma Eleanor and Carver prepared me well. For each question, I have records, figures, and plans ready. When testimony concludes, Judge Harriman calls for closing arguments. Preston emphasizes Valerie's professional qualifications and the family's long-standing financial interests. Carver counters with Eleanor's clear intentions and documentation of mismanagement. The courtroom falls silent as Judge Harriman reviews her notes. Valerie maintains her composed expression, but her fingers tap rhythmically against her leather portfolio, a nervous habit from childhood. Finally, Judge Harriman looks up. Having reviewed the evidence presented today, I find the formation of Stonebridge Holdings, LLC, and the subsequent property transfer were executed properly by Eleanor Wells, while she was fully competent to make such decisions. A soft exhale escapes from Mrs. Simmons beside me. Furthermore, the financial records presented show management practices that are, at best, professionally questionable. The judge's gaze settles briefly on Valerie. This court upholds Miranda Wells's ownership and management rights to Riverside Apartments through Stonebridge Holdings, LLC. Relief floods through me, warm and overwhelming. Carver places a steadying hand on my shoulder. Additionally, Judge Harriman continues, the court orders a full accounting of all Riverside Apartments finances during Valerie Wells Harrison's management period. Any misappropriated maintenance funds must be repaid to Stonebridge Holdings within 60 days. Valerie's composure finally cracks. Her shoulders slump slightly, though she maintains her rigid posture. Any further interference with Stonebridge Holdings operations will result in additional sanctions. Judge Harriman concludes, this matter is decided. The gavel strikes with finality. The sound reverberates through the courtroom, through my chest. Thank you, Your Honor, I say, voice steady despite the emotion swelling inside me. As people rise, a gentleman in a dark suit approaches Preston, handing him a business card. I catch the words, Bar Association, before Carver guides me toward the exit. Mrs. Simmons embraces me, tears in her eyes. She's watching over you, dear. Eleanor would be so proud. Tenants surround us, offering congratulations. Mr. Garcia pumps my hand enthusiastically. Mrs. Peterson taps her cane on the floor in approval. All these years of documentation just paid off, Carver says, satisfaction evident in his voice. Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing. I turned to see my parents standing awkwardly at the periphery of the celebration. My mother's expression wavers between confusion and dismay. My father stares at the floor. Behind them, Valerie confers with Preston, her face carefully blank despite the defeat. For a moment, I consider approaching them with words of reconciliation. Instead, I turn back to the community, gathered around me, the people who trusted me, supported me, believed in me, when my own family wouldn't. This was never about revenge, I tell Mrs. Simmons quietly. It was about the truth. She nods, understanding in her eyes. The truth has a way of setting everything right in the end. Outside the courthouse, sunshine breaks through clouds that threatened rain all morning. The light feels symbolic, warming my face as I descend the steps with my real family, the one Grandma Eleanor helped me find. I stand in the renovated community room of Riverside Apartments, watching Mrs. Simmons arrange flowers on the buffet table. The morning light streams through new energy-efficient windows, highlighting the freshly painted walls in warm sandstone. 6 months since the court victory, and sometimes I still wake up expecting to find it was all a dream. "Miranda, where do you want the punch bowl?" asks Mrs. Simmons, now officially our resident liaison. Her silver hair catches the light as she turns. "Next to the cookies," I answer, adjusting the commemorative plaque we're unveiling today. My fingers trace the engraved words. Eleanor Wells Community Room, where neighbors become family. Mr. Garcia from 3B enters carrying a homemade cake. "Just like I promised," he says, "my mother's recipe to celebrate our new heating system." My phone buzzes with a message from Lawrence Carver, now permanent legal counsel for Stonebridge Holdings. The court denied Valerie's final appeal. "Congratulations, this chapter is officially closed." A weight lifts from my shoulders. Valerie's law firm placed her on leave after the trial revealed her financial manipulations. Last I heard, she took a position at a smaller firm across town. The phone rings again. My parents. After months of awkward conversations, they've slowly begun to acknowledge what happened. "We're running late," my mother says, her voice carrying that new hesitancy. "Your father wanted to bring those photo albums you asked about." As I set down the phone, Mrs. Simmons appeared at my elbow. "You never wanted to fight," she observes quietly. "You just wanted fairness." "I never thought I'd win," I admit, straightening brochures for our tenant assistance program. She squeezes my hand. "Eleanor knew you would. That's why she left you everything you needed." I nod, remembering Grandma's whispered words years ago. "Your sister seeks power. You seek connection. Remember which one builds a legacy." The morning sun shifts, illuminating the community room 6 months later. I stand confidently before the contractor team, reviewing renovation plans for the East Wing. My posture is straight, voice steady as I question a proposed materials change. The specifications call for commercial-grade flooring in the hallways. I say, pointing to the blueprints, "This alternative won't hold up to daily traffic." The lead contractor, who initially addressed his comments to my male assistant, now meets my eyes directly. "You're right, Miss Wells. We'll stick with the original plan." Later that morning, I took my coffee to the balcony of my new apartment, the building manager's suite where Grandma Eleanor once lived. From here, I can see the small garden where Mrs. Peterson tends tomatoes while chatting with a young mother who moved in last month. The waiting list for apartments now stretches to 37 names. Despite real estate pressure, I've maintained rents at affordable levels while steadily improving the building. My phone rings. Marissa, a young property manager who's been shadowing me. "The bank approved the Hawkins family for the payment plan," she reports. "Just like you suggested." "Excellent," I replied. "Remember what I told you. A building is bricks, a community is people," she finishes. In the afternoon, Mrs. Simmons finds me reviewing applications for our housing assistance program. "You're not just maintaining a building," she says, settling into the chair across from my desk. "You're building a home. Eleanor would be proud." Through my window, I spot Valerie's car pulling up to the curb. Her designer clothes were replaced with something more subdued, her posture less commanding. Our eyes meet briefly before she continues down the street. Perhaps there's a lesson learned in that glance. The seasons turn, bringing us to 1 year after the court victory. I sit across from Thomas Jenkins, a widower facing eviction after medical bills depleted his savings. "My landlord says business is business," he explains, shoulders slumped. The phrase triggers a memory. Valerie delivering my eviction notice with those exact words. I study his modest pension that barely covers essentials. Riverside has a flexible payment plan for residents in transition. I tell him, we can work with your income and adjust as your situation improves. Hope flickers across his face. I don't understand. Every other place turned me away. Riverside operates differently, I explain. My grandmother taught me that property isn't just an asset on a balance sheet. That evening, during our monthly community gathering, I watched 3 families who might otherwise be homeless share a meal in our community room. The Eleanor Wells Community Fund, now directed by Mrs. Simmons, has helped 17 households find stable housing this year. Property owners from neighboring buildings mingle with tenants, interested in our model. Your grandmother's vision is spreading, Mrs. Simmons whispers. Compassionate housing with dignity. My parents stand near the dessert table, tentatively engaging with tenants they'd once dismissed. Our relationship remains formal, but the rigid silence between us has softened into something that might, with time, heal. As the gathering winds down, I climb to the rooftop garden. The sunset bathes the neighborhood in amber light, highlighting the small improvements that have transformed Riverside. Grandma Eleanor's voice seems to whisper on the evening breeze. Power without compassion is just control. I take a deep breath, at peace with my choices. When people show you who they are, believe them, but leave room for them to become better. That's the true legacy Grandma Eleanor left me, more valuable than any property deed. I arrive at Hannah's wedding reception alone, my heels clicking against the stone path winding through rows of meticulously tended grapevines. The setting sun bathes the Napa Valley hills in golden light, casting long shadows across what the guests around me keep calling absolutely breathtaking. The perfume of roses mingles with the earthy scent of wine barrels and freshly cut grass. Then I see him. My wine glass slips from my fingers and shatters on the stone path. The crimson liquid spatters across my beige pumps, but I barely notice. Grandpa Walter sits alone at a small table tucked behind the catering tents, next to stacked garbage bins. His weathered hands rest on a white tablecloth that looks dingy compared to the crisp linens adorning the other tables. At 84, the 8-hour flight from Vermont has clearly taken its toll. His shoulders slump with exhaustion while he watches the celebration from his isolated corner. Emily, you made it. My mother Linda's voice rings with practiced warmth as she approaches a cluster of guests nearby. She doesn't look in my direction. Yes, Walter insisted on coming, despite our concerns about his health. Her laugh tinkles like expensive crystal. You know how stubborn the older generation can be. She pointedly avoids looking toward Grandpa's secluded table while her jewelry catches the fading sunlight. My mind flashes back 3 months to our family dinner. We sat around my parents' mahogany table while Grandpa regaled us with stories of building the vineyard decades ago. Started with nothing but rocky soil everyone said wouldn't grow a weed. He'd said, eyes bright with memory. Your grandmother and I slept in that old cabin the first 2 years, hauling water bucket by bucket until we could afford proper irrigation. Mother had cut him off with a wave of her manicured hand. Dad, please. These embarrassing exaggerations make us sound like peasants. The Harrington name means something now. I'd spoken up quietly. I'd like to hear more about those early days, Grandpa. Mother's gaze had turned frigid. Always siding with the past instead of embracing our future, Emily. As Grandpa left that night, he'd winked at me, whispering, "Patience outlasts pride," before kissing my cheek. Now, watching him sit alone by the garbage while Hannah twirls in her designer gown under twinkling lights, something inside me snaps. I want to protect my grandfather from the rest of my family. I march toward my mother, intercepting her before she reaches another group of admirers. Why is he sitting by the garbage? I ask loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Mother's smile remains fixed, but her eyes narrow dangerously. Not now, Emily, she hisses through clenched teeth. Yes, now. That's your father sitting next to trash bins while everyone else enjoys the view. I deliberately raise my voice even more so that everyone can hear. She grips my arm, pulling me away from curious ears. He insisted on coming. We didn't want him embarrassing the family with his outdated ways and frail condition. He's lucky we accommodated him at all. My hands have been trembling, but suddenly they stop. I straighten my spine, looking directly into her eyes. He built something that lasted, I say clearly. That deserves respect, not the seating arrangement in the garbage. The sound of the slap echoes across the stone terrace. Conversations halt. Music seems to fade. My cheek burns where my mother's hand struck it. Security? she calls, her voice steady despite the wild anger in her eyes. Please escort my daughter out. She's causing a scene. Two men in black suits materialize beside me. I don't resist as they gently but firmly guide me toward the exit. With each step, the weight of years of seeking approval lifts from my shoulders. I've spent my life trying to balance my love for Grandpa's vineyard traditions with my mother's obsession with social climbing. I've endured being the difficult daughter, the disappointment, the one who wouldn't play along. As the security guards walk me past clusters of whispering guests, a strange calm settles over me. The realization is both painful and freeing. They never saw me as family, just as an audience for their performance. I turn back once to see Grandpa watching me go, something like pride flickering across his weathered face. 10 minutes later, the sound hits me first. A distinct engine whine cutting through the evening air, unmistakable to anyone who spent time around private aviation. A Gulfstream G500. My step falters mid-stride toward the vineyard exit, fingers instinctively gripping a wooden post for support as my heart skips several beats. Ma'am, are you all right? One of the security guards asks, his hand hovering near my elbow without touching. I don't answer. My attention locks on the far entrance where a gleaming Rolls-Royce glides to a stop, flanked by two imposing black SUVs. The vehicles halt with military precision, their engines falling silent in perfect unison. When the Rolls door opens, my breath catches in my throat. Grandpa Walter steps out, his movements fluid and deliberate. Gone is the hunched, exhausted man from the garbage table. This Grandpa stands tall, shoulders squared beneath an impeccably tailored suit. Two men in dark attire flank him discreetly, their earpieces and watchful posture marking them clearly as security personnel. That's impossible. I whisper, my mind racing to reconcile two wildly different versions of the same man existing mere minutes apart. The truth crashes through me like a wave breaking against rocks. For years, they've been lying to both of us, telling Grandpa I was too busy to visit while telling me he was too frail to travel. A systematic campaign of isolation disguised as concern. The wedding band stops mid-song as Grandpa Walter walks steadily toward the main reception tent. Conversations die. Wine glasses freeze halfway to parted lips. My mother's smile shatters like thin ice as she spots him approaching. A man I recognize as Mateo, the vineyard's longest-serving employee, steps forward from among the staff. Without a word, he hands Grandpa a microphone, his weathered face revealing nothing while the catering team quietly shifts positions to stand behind my grandfather. I apologize for interrupting the festivities. Grandpa's voice rings clear across the stunned gathering, but there seems to be some confusion about my health and this beautiful property. Father tugs at his collar while Mother's knuckles whiten around her champagne flute. First, I should congratulate Hannah and Jason. Grandpa nods toward my sister and her new husband. You selected a magnificent venue, though I admit I was surprised when you booked it through Harrington Legacy Holdings, my holding company. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Hannah's mouth falls open while Jason's eyes dart frantically toward the nearest exit. Yes, this venue has been in my portfolio for nearly a decade. Grandpa's tone remains conversational, but his eyes harden. What troubles me more is discovering that for years, my family has been systematically lying to both Emily and me about our relationship with each other. My throat tightens as decades of isolation suddenly make terrible sense. Every missed birthday, every Grandpa's too tired to talk moment, every Emily couldn't make it excuse. My rage grows bigger and bigger with every second passing. Across the tent, Hannah's perfect day crumbles around her. Several prestigious guests begin whispering, gathering purses and jackets. Father slips away, phone already pressed to his ear, undoubtedly attempting damage control. The social consequences unfold in real time, the carefully cultivated Harrington image of generational success fracturing under the weight of revealed deception. I should feel vindicated watching this collapse, but unexpected guilt washes through me instead. Hannah didn't deserve to have her wedding day destroyed, regardless of her complicity in our family's manipulations. Her tear-stained makeup and trembling hands pierce through my satisfaction, leaving something more complicated in its place. If I stand with Grandpa, I gain the only true family connection I've ever had, but at what cost? The wedding disintegrates around us as guests make polite but hasty departures. Each departure represents years of my parents' careful social climbing undone in minutes. Mateo appears at my elbow, pressing a leather portfolio into my hands. He kept these for you, he whispers, his voice barely audible over the murmuring crowd. Records of every time they excluded you while using your name to access his resources. The trust fund withdrawals supposedly for your education. The vineyard inspections they claimed you were conducting. My fingers tighten around the smooth leather as the weight of evidence presses against my palm. Years of manipulation documented in meticulous detail. The proof I never knew I needed and never wanted to see. As I stand there holding tangible evidence of years of deliberate deception, a question rises through the chaos of my thoughts. Should I expose everything immediately, creating a clean break but causing a public scandal, or handle this privately to minimize damage to innocent bystanders like the vineyard staff who depend on its reputation? Would revealing family secrets be justice or just another form of pain? What would you do when the truth finally comes at such a high cost? 10 minutes later, I duck behind a row of empty wine barrels as Hannah's wedding planner marches past, speaking urgently into her headset. The celebration continues despite my forced exit, music floating across the vineyard like nothing has happened. The bride is requesting immediate damage control. The planner barks. Tell everyone there's been a misunderstanding about family inheritance. Nothing more. My phone vibrates with a text from Mateo, our longest-serving vineyard worker. Your mother is talking to the Davidsons by the South Terrace. Something about your grandfather's health. As I want to check what they are talking about, I creep closer to the terrace, keeping to the shadows between grapevines. Mother stands surrounded by 3 couples in evening wear, her diamonds catching the last rays of sunset. Walter is experiencing cognitive decline. She says, her voice pitched for sympathy. Emily has been exploiting his confusion. She's always been difficult. The man beside her, Thomas Reynolds, I realize with a jolt, wine critic for Vineyard Monthly, pulls out his phone and begins typing notes. Fascinating family drama at the Harrington wedding, he mutters as he types. Matriarch claims elder abuse while excluding founder from celebration. Mother blanches, finally noticing his documentation. The vineyard's reputation hangs by a thread. I retreat toward the equipment shed where I know I can access the vineyard's computer network. When I try logging into our photo archive, my credentials are rejected. After 3 attempts, a message appears. Account deactivated 87 days ago. 3 months. Right after I defended Grandpa at dinner last time we were gathered at my parents' house. I try the marketing database next. Success. And there they are. Dozens of my photographs showcasing seasonal changes in the vineyard, sunset light filtering through autumn leaves, close-ups of the first tender buds each spring. All credited to Hannah Harrington's artistic eye for vineyard beauty. Years of my work, my perspective, my connection to this place, stolen. My throat tightens as I scroll through image after image. The pruning techniques I documented, the weather patterns I tracked, all presented as Hannah's profound understanding of wine country. They did the same to your documentation of soil composition testing. Comes a voice behind me. Mateo stands in the doorway, his weathered face drawn with concern. When investors visited last fall, Miss Hannah presented your binder of soil samples as her own research project. How long has this been happening? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Years, Miss Emily. But some of us remember who was really here when the family was not. He hands me a small notebook. Carmen, Miguel, and I have been keeping records. Which family member actually visited, who learned the processes, who cared enough to know our names? I flip through pages of dates, observations, and signatures from longtime workers. A secret history of who truly tended the vineyard's heart while others claimed its face. Miss Emily. Mateo hesitates. Your grandfather is looking for you. I find Grandpa Walter standing at the edge of a small, walled garden tucked behind the original stone cottage. The space bursts with wild flowers and herbs, so different from the manicured landscape of the main grounds. Eleanor's garden, Grandpa says, taking my hand. Named for your grandmother. He leads me to a stone bench surrounded by rosemary and lavender. The evening air carries their mingled fragrance. Your grandmother always said you were the only one who ever noticed when the first buds appeared each spring, he says, voice thick with memory. While Hannah was practicing her social graces and your mother was planning parties, you were out with the workers, learning how things grow. Before I can respond, shouting erupts from the direction of the barrel room. We follow the sound, entering the cavernous stone space where family voices ricochet off ancient walls. This vineyard is our birthright. Mother shouts at Grandpa, her carefully constructed poise abandoned. We've modernized it, marketed it, made it relevant. I step forward. No, you've packaged it, I say quietly. The room falls silent as heads turn toward me. There's a difference between tending roots and selling their fruit. Hannah surges forward in a swirl of white satin. You're ruining my wedding day, she hisses. You've always been jealous that I was chosen to be the face of Harrington Vineyards. Chosen? I laugh, the sound hollow against stone walls. You mean you accepted the role without doing the work? Jason appears at Hannah's side, his tuxedo immaculate but his face flushed with alcohol. Name your price, he demands. What monetary settlement would end this embarrassment? Everyone has a number. The question clarifies everything. They see only asset value where I see living heritage. I'm not fighting for ownership, but for honoring a legacy of creation over consumption. There isn't enough money in your trust fund, Jason, I reply. The room goes quiet as Mateo enters, followed by Carmen, Miguel, and Joseph, the vineyard's longest-serving employees. Miss Emily is the only one who learned how to test acidity levels properly. Carmen says, her voice firm despite her nervousness. She can identify grape varieties by leaf shape alone. Miguel nods. When frost threatened the North Slope 3 years ago, Miss Emily was the one who stayed all night with us, monitoring temperatures and running heaters. Joseph steps forward. I taught her how to prune when she was 12. By 15, she was better at it than me. Their words ripple through the gathered wedding guests. I notice several influential vineyard owners exchanging glances, reevaluating the family drama they're witnessing. One distinguished woman in her 70s nods appreciatively. The girl identified a phylloxera risk in my eastern field last year when she visited. Saved me half my crop. Later that evening, in the estate office, Grandpa and I pore over legal documents spread across his mahogany desk. They told me you weren't interested in running things, he says, indicating a stack of management plans. That you preferred your life in Chicago. I shake my head. They never asked me. You know things would have been different if they had, Grandpa. He slides a folder toward me. These are the management transfer papers Linda claimed I signed 3 years ago. Look at the signature. I examine the document carefully. This isn't your handwriting. A sharp knock interrupts us. The head of security enters, his expression grave. Sir, we have a situation. Mr. Jason Matthews was caught on camera entering the restricted fermentation room with an unidentified container. Grandpa's face hardens. Show us the footage, now. I stand, feeling a strange calm settle over me. The battle for the vineyard's soul has moved beyond family drama to something far more sinister. 15 minutes later, I review the security footage for the third time, my finger hovering over the tablet screen as Jason enters the fermentation room. The timestamp reads 8:42 p.m., precisely when Hannah was cutting the wedding cake. My jaw tightens as I watch him pull a small container from his jacket pocket. There, I say, pointing to the screen where Grandpa Walter and his attorney can see clearly. He breaks the seal on tank 14 at 8:43, then moves to tanks 16 and 17 within the next 90 seconds. Grandpa leans forward, his weathered hands steady as he makes notes on a legal pad. And those contain? The Eleanor's Reserve batches. My voice comes out flat, controlled. Our highest value wine, and coincidentally, the only ones where I documented the fermentation process personally. The attorney, Mr. Dunham, removes his glasses and rubs the bridge of his nose. This transforms everything. We're no longer discussing a family disagreement about inheritance. This is product tampering, a criminal investigation. I click through to another camera angle, documenting each broken seal and potential contamination point. The red wine would hide whatever Jason added, at least initially. My stomach churns at the thought. I want proper evidence handling, I tell them, resisting the urge to storm across the property and confront Jason immediately. No shortcuts, even though every part of me wants to drag him out of that reception by his custom lapels. I made myself very clear. Grandpa touches my shoulder. Patience outlasts pride, remember? The intercom buzzes. Mateo's voice comes through, tense but professional. Miss Harrington, your mother is demanding a family-only meeting in the main tasting room. She says airing dirty laundry violates family values. A bitter laugh escapes me. Perfect timing. When we enter the tasting room, Linda stands with her arms crossed, Carl hovering nervously behind her. Hannah sits at the table, her wedding gown pooling around her chair. Jason stands with one hand on her shoulder, his face a mask of righteous indignation. This has gone far enough, Linda announces. Family matters stay within family. Interesting principle, I say, opening the leather portfolio Matteo gave me. Was it family values when you used my name on legal documents while excluding me from meetings? Or when you claimed my photographs for vineyard marketing while deleting my access to the family archives? I spread documents across the table, loan applications, promotional materials, even trust documents, all bearing my forged signature. Linda's face flushes. Those are confidential. We're confidential, Grandpa corrects. Now they're evidence. Jason steps forward, his wedding day confidence fraying at the edges. The security footage is clearly manipulated. Anyone familiar with digital systems knows how easily video can be altered. Mr. Dunham raises an eyebrow. Interesting you should mention the security system's technical specifications, Mr. Bradley. The vineyard uses a proprietary system with multiple secure servers, information not publicly available. Jason pales. Everyone knows modern security uses backups. Not our particular configuration, I say quietly. I helped install it last year during one of my irrelevant visits. Hannah's eyes dart between Jason and me, then down to his hands. She shifts her chair slightly away from him, the first physical distance I've seen between them all day. When I see the look of betrayal on Hannah's face as she realizes Jason had been willing to destroy our family legacy just to maintain their social standing, I wonder, was there still room for reconciliation with my sister? Or had some family bridges been permanently burned? A commotion outside breaks the tense silence. Through the window, I see Matteo directing staff to secure the production areas. Workers in vineyard uniforms form a human chain, checking each tank and barrel room methodically. The staff have verified no contamination spread beyond the initial tanks. Matteo reports, stepping into the room. We've isolated all potentially affected product. Mr. Dunham removes another document from his briefcase and places it before Linda. This might interest you, Mrs. Harrington. It's notification that Emily has been the legal heir to the Vineyard Trust for 2 years. The original was sent certified mail to your home address. Linda's carefully composed face shows a flicker of panic. The notification you apparently intercepted, Grandpa adds, voice low but carrying across the room. The murmur of voices grows louder, wedding guests in the courtyard watching this family drama unfold. Not the scandal they expected, but truth instead. The distinctive siren of the sheriff's department wails in the distance, growing closer. You called the police? Carl finally speaks, his voice cracking. Over a family disagreement? I didn't, I answer. Security protocols triggered an automatic alert when product tampering was detected. Carl looks at Linda, then back at me. I knew she hid documents from you. The words tumble out after years of silence. The trust notification, invitations to board meetings, even your grandmother's letters. Linda whirls to face him. Carl! Through the windows, I see wedding guests discreetly gathering their belongings, making polite excuses to the catering staff. Linda's carefully cultivated social network fragments in real time. Grandpa rises slowly from his chair. I think it's time I address the remaining guests and staff regarding the vineyard's future, don't you? The setting sun catches the crystal wineglass in his hand, casting prism-like reflections across the room, fragments of light illuminating truths hidden too long in shadow. 10 minutes later, after all the mess they created, Linda corners me near the tasting room entrance, her designer suit wrinkled for the first time in memory. Her perfectly manicured hands shake slightly as she grips my elbow. Emily, be reasonable. Her voice carries none of its usual authority. We can share ownership with Hannah. Keep this in the family without embarrassing legal proceedings. Behind her, Carl hovers by the vintage Cabernet display, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand nervously adjusting his collar. Through the window, I spot Hannah sitting alone on a stone bench, mascara streaking her cheeks as she scrolls through flight options on her phone. I could contest Walter's competency in court. Linda continues, desperation edging into her tone. You know how these things drag out for years. Jason appears at her side, his wedding boutonniere wilted. I was just following family wishes. He insists, eyes darting toward the security team standing with Grandpa. Your mother made decisions she thought best for everyone. I take a deep breath, feeling strangely calm. For years, I've prepared for this moment without knowing it would come. I've been taking viticulture courses for 8 years. I say, opening my leather portfolio. Online classes at first, then weekend intensives whenever I told you I was working late in Chicago. Linda's perfectly arched eyebrows rise as I spread out certification documents across the antique sideboard. Next come my journals, dozens of them, filled with detailed notes on seasonal changes, soil composition, and harvest timing dating back to my high school years. You thought I was taking photographs as a hobby? I continue, turning pages filled with technical diagrams and weather pattern analyses. I was documenting everything about this place that matters. Grandpa Walter approaches, carrying a weathered tin box. "Found this right where Eleanor said you would," he says, placing it in my hands, under the old rose trellis in her garden. Inside lies a collection of handwritten plans for vineyard expansion, my grandmother's flowing script detailing slopes and sun exposures, with notes in the margins. "Eastern slope for Emily's ideas, the only one who asks about the soil. Emily was the only one who visited me in Vermont after your mother passed." Grandpa says to Linda, his voice gentle but firm, "Every month, without fail, while you were too busy running what you thought would soon be yours." I meet my mother's gaze directly. I don't want to own the vineyard because it's valuable. I want to continue it because it's valuable to me. The remaining wedding guests and vineyard staff have gathered in the grand tasting room. Crystal glasses catch the late afternoon light, casting rainbow patterns across white oak barrels. The room falls silent as Grandpa takes his place at the center, his weathered hand steady on my shoulder. "Today we're announcing the launch of a new label," he says, voice carrying to every corner. "Eleanor's Bloom, dedicated to Emily's vision for our vineyard's future." Linda pushes forward, mouth opening to interrupt, but falls silent when every face in the room turns toward Grandpa and me, their attention absolute. I unfold the original blueprint of the vineyard, yellowed with age but preserved with care. "My grandmother drew this 60 years ago," I explain, pointing to the eastern slope. "See her handwriting here? Saving this section for Emily's ideas. She knew before I did." A longtime customer, Mrs. Delacourt, who's purchased our reserve Cabernet every year since before I was born, raises her glass. "I remember when Emily showed me the new irrigation system 5 summers ago. The family was unavailable that weekend, too." Other voices join in, customers recalling vineyard tours I'd given while my family attended charity galas, sommeliers mentioning suggestions I'd made that improved vintages, workers sharing stories of pre-dawn harvests where I worked alongside them while Hannah slept off parties. Grandpa lifts his glass, the ruby liquid catching the light. "This vineyard doesn't belong to me anymore," he announces, voice strong despite his years. "It belongs to Emily not because of blood, but because of love." Near the entrance, security discreetly escorts Jason toward the parking lot, where the county sheriff waits beside his patrol car, evidence bags visible through the window. The product tampering investigation has officially begun. The gathering begins to disperse in small, murmuring groups. Some approach to congratulate me, others avoid eye contact as they slip away. Linda and Carl have already disappeared, their luxury sedan kicking up dust on the main drive. From across the room, I notice a solitary figure standing apart from the remaining guests. Hannah remains near the terrace doors, caught in the space between retreating with our parents and staying to face what comes next. As our eyes meet, tears begin streaming down her face. Her shoulders straighten, and she takes one hesitant step in my direction, then another. I wonder what words will follow her tears, yet I don't care anymore. In 6 months, I will protect all my grandpa has been building all his life. I stand tall among the neat rows of vines, my voice carrying confidently across the attentive group of industry experts gathered before me. 6 months have transformed both this vineyard and myself. The eastern slope receives morning sun but afternoon shade from those hills, I explain, pointing toward the ridgeline. We've incorporated sustainable irrigation that reduces water usage by 30% while improving yield quality. The wine critics and industry journalists scribble notes, their expressions thoughtful rather than skeptical. No longer do I shrink into corners at these gatherings. Now I command the center, sharing innovations that have earned Eleanor's Bloom 3 regional recognitions in half a year. "Miss Harrington," calls a reporter from Wine Enthusiast, "your sustainable approach seems to honor traditional methods while embracing modern science. Was that intentional?" I smile, noticing my photograph prominently displayed on the latest regional wine publication. Someone carries my name correctly credited beneath an image of sunrise over the vines. How different from when Hannah's face graced every marketing material, claiming credit for work she never did. The best vineyards. I answer, Our conversations between past wisdom and future potential. Later that evening, lamplight warms the renovated dining room as we gather around the restored oak table, the same one where, months ago, Mother silenced Grandpa's stories of building this place from nothing. The difference now feels almost surreal. Grandpa Walter sits at the head of the table, his weathered hands steady as he raises a glass of our newest vintage. Mateo and our core staff of 7 fill the remaining seats. The mahogany gleams beneath plates of locally sourced food prepared by our new chef. The Peterson account doubled their order after tasting the reserve Cabernet. I say, the words flowing naturally. But that wouldn't have happened without Rosa improving our fermentation timing. Her insight made all the difference. Rosa, our cellar master who my parents barely acknowledged for 20 years, blushes at the recognition. Grandpa catches my eye with quiet approval. I've learned what he always knew: true leadership means celebrating others rather than claiming every success as personal triumph. After dinner, Mateo uncorks a special bottle as our small gathering moves to the stone patio overlooking the valley. Stars puncture the indigo sky while crickets provide nature's soundtrack. To roots that withstand storms, Mateo toasts, raising his glass toward the newly completed garden I've established in Grandma Eleanor's memory. Stone pathways wind through native plants and heritage roses she once tended, creating a sanctuary that honors her vision while adding my own touch. We clink glasses, this loyal group who stood beside me when everything threatened to collapse. Their faith proved stronger than family obligation, their integrity more valuable than social standing. The next morning, Grandpa and I walk the vineyard at sunrise, reviewing expansion plans for the northern section. His footsteps are steadier now that he's living here permanently, freed from the isolation my parents imposed. Hannah called yesterday, he mentions casually, asked if she might visit next weekend. I nod, neither excited nor resentful. Our relationship rebuilds slowly, one honest conversation at a time. Unlike mother and father, whose absence speaks volumes about priorities unchanged, Hannah has begun to recognize the damage done. The guest book filled another page yesterday. I tell him, more signatures in 6 months than the previous 3 years combined. As evening falls, I climb alone to the highest point of our property. The sunset paints the valley in amber and gold while shadows lengthen across what is now truly mine. From my pocket, I withdraw the faded photograph of Grandma Eleanor standing among newly planted vines 50 years ago, her expression reflecting the same determined hope I now feel. As I stand there watching the sun set over what was now truly mine, I wonder, is preserving a legacy about keeping things the same? Or about having the courage to let them grow in new directions while honoring their roots? What would you protect, and what would you allow to change?